Tonight's workshop, Bicycle Friendly Motorist Training, is a workshop to have information about all road users. Most of our educational content is catered and geared towards cyclists. However, motorists, people who drive cars and trucks and motorcycles and all types of other vehicles, we all use the road together. And so we all should share the road together. If you see those messages out into the roadway, it says share the road. And that's really what that is, that we all can share the road. And so with that being said, let me launch a poll really quick and ask if you did any riding this weekend. Actually, if you did any riding, if you drove a vehicle this weekend, or did you walk this weekend? And so the purpose of that question is just to share results. It's just to take note that we all are using the public roadway: pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. Okay, I'm gonna ask a second question here. Okay, technical difficulties a little bit. Let me just go slow. Okay, go slow. Second question is, as we are talking about road usage, I want to ask what is your primary role of attending the training tonight? Are you a cyclist? Are you primarily a cyclist? Are you primarily a motorist, where you just driving your vehicles, or are you both? And if we just want to know, so you can get a better understanding of why, if you are a motorist, why cyclists may do the things that they do, or motorists. Just all together, we all sharing the road. Okay, so let me stop sharing the results now. All right, so that is really enough about me and what we are here for. I know you're here for the good stuff, which is bicycle friendly motorist training. And so I'm going to hand it off to Jason, who's going to share all the good information about bicycle friendly motorist training. Jason, your turn.
Excellent intro, Deltrice. I'm gonna kick this up here for everyone. And, a little bit first about myself. When we do this training, I always want to make sure that people know that, I come from this I've ridden bicycles since I was, as early as I could, but I've also driven cars since as soon as I could get a license. So, you're talking, and I'm nearing about 800,000 miles of motor vehicle driving. So I always like to make sure that that's set up front, so that, I'm not coming at this from a point of trying to school drivers or come down upon them. There's a lot change. There are more and more people are riding, and the roads are changing. There's different types of infrastructure happening, and the education doesn't always keep up with that. So that's the point of this training, is to really kind of bring some of the information forward and help drivers understand, how to interact properly on the roadway and do it in a safer manner. And that's kind of what we'll cover here tonight. We're gonna talk about, how the road gets shared properly. We're gonna talk about some of those infrastructure changes that you see pop up. We're gonna talk about the common ways that things go wrong, and then the best practices to help avoid them happening in the first place. And to close it out, we'll also talk about why you see people on bikes doing certain things, and then even cover some of what we teach them to kind of bring it full circle. So hopefully in the end, you can kind of see how the broader picture of this all works together to allow the road to work for all users, and not just, the motor vehicles. I just dropped a slide that's got a lot of data on it, and I don't plan to read through it and beleaguer any of those things, but you can see some trends there. There's about a 50-50 split. When things happen and things go wrong, oftentimes about half the time it's the driver's fault, and about half the time it's the cyclist's fault, because in the end, the common denominator is the human. Whether it's behind the handlebars or behind the wheel, it's human mistakes or human aggressiveness that can kind of cause these things to happen. But as you would expect, most of them happen at intersections. It definitely peaks up in urban areas, and also gets higher during commute times. So basically what you want to keep in mind is the denser the area is with people, the higher your alert level needs to be that there's going to be cyclists and pedestrians around. Because in the end, the main takeaway is that when this happens, oftentimes the driver could have done something better, but the cyclist could have done something better too. And we spend an awful lot of our time training cyclists on how to do the right thing. But tonight is kind of turning the table a little bit and showing how drivers can do the right thing as well. Because in the end, you know, when things do go bad, a driver of a motor vehicle is inside of a metal cage surrounded by airbags and a lot of technology. A bicycle rider or pedestrian is very, very exposed. So, you know, it's definitely upon the drivers when we're out there to take that extra caution and really learn how to do this right, because we're far less vulnerable inside our cars than people on the bicycles. If we take nothing else away tonight, this slide is key. You know, you think about all the streets around Cleveland that are 25 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. I see a lot of speeding, and you start to look at statistics like this, you can see like why speed matters so much. You know, the differential between, you know, hitting a cyclist or pedestrian at 20 miles an hour versus 40 is a radical difference. You know, this is data based on pedestrians, but you can think about this as a cyclist as well. Because if you're going 45 and you're passing a cyclist that's doing 15, that 30 mile an hour, that central position on that cyclist only has a half a chance of survival if you hit them. So keep in mind that, you know, if you're on residential streets, 25 miles an hour, speeding is foolish. And same thing goes for the ones that are 35. You gotta keep the speed reasonable because it gives you time to react, and it gives that person, you know, a chance of survival should the worst happen. And this is why you see some street designs changing. It's kind of some self-enforcing designs that just don't allow drivers to have that excessive speed and trying to keep the speed in check back lower where it belongs. So very important slide to stick into your memory there. So let's talk about sharing the road. First and foremost, a bicycle. When you see bicycles on the road, they're, you know, when we're driving our cars and you see bikes along with you, they are legal road vehicles subject to all the same rights and rules of the road. And when you're driving on a road where infrastructure is absent, there are no bike lanes or there are no trails, or, you know, there's nothing there for bikes, cyclists are going to do best if you treat them like a motor vehicle. And if they act like a motor vehicle, following these same patterns so that there are no surprises and there are no misconceptions or misunderstandings about who is getting ready to do what, right? But in the end, even looking at this photo, there's no denying that the cyclist is so much more vulnerable than you are in your car. You know, a cyclist against that bus or against that car full of airbags, I mean, that cyclist is, you know, is in a much more precarious position. And that's why you're seeing infrastructure change in cities. It's trying to, you know, accommodate for that huge weight and speed differential that's encountered on the roads. So first up are bike lanes. As a driver, the best way for you to think about a bike lane is that it's just it's a separate travel lane for a smaller, slower vehicle, because that's what a bicycle or a scooter is. But you take a road like this that could be 35 miles an hour, you have space for a car to travel 35 and you have space for the bike to travel 15, right? And you can do so without the conflict of a shared lane. But you know, the do nots are, you don't drive in them for any period of time. You definitely don't park in them because you're obstructing a travel lane, just like you wouldn't park in a travel lane otherwise. And a common one that we'll explain here in a minute is when you see a cyclist in the bike lane, you don't speed up and try to pass them before an intersection, only to quickly turn right in front of them. It's a common mistake that you know, drivers try to, you know, do a fast overtaking move and pass the cyclist to the left to make a hard right turn. But think about that in a way that you would never do that on if it was two like motor vehicle lanes. You would never speed up, pass a car to the left only to do abruptly turn right in front of them, because you would crash into one another. And that's what's going to happen with the bicycle as well. So those are your do nots. And they're pretty simple. Just treat them as separate travel lanes for those people out there that are traveling slower than you. What you can do is like think about perpendicular. You can cross them entering into like a parking lot. Since they're a travel lane, when you approach a turn, like when you approach that right-hand turn, assuming that it's clear, you do enter into the bike lane to take that bike lane before you turn right, so the cyclist is clear what you're doing. Always looking carefully before you do that. And you can enter them briefly to avoid hazards. So just like a cyclist traveling down a bicycle lane, they can leave the bike lane if there's glass, debris, and come out to the other lane and then back. Same thing, if you're driving your car and there's a pothole in the road and you need to enter the bike lane to avoid the pothole, that's fine as well, assuming in either scenario, you're looking out for one another. The cyclist is going to look for the car before they leave the bike lane to come around debris. And as a driver, you definitely want to check that bike lane before you move out of your lane to use the bike lane temporarily to get around like an obstruction or road debris, right? So it's that give and take. They're separate lanes for separate users, but there is a little cross point there. It's allowed for short periods, and certainly to cross them. They're not barriers. You can never cross, like entering parking lots and things like that. And the do's, I talked about how you can enter the bike lane before a right-hand turn. All over the city of Cleveland, you'll see where the bike lane's solid, but then as you approach the intersection, you'll see it turn dashed like you see in the photo there. That's kind of indicating to you as a driver that this is a zone they would expect you to merge into the bike lane to make a right-hand turn. It's also alerting cyclists that this is probably the area where that's going to happen as well. So this is where, as a driver, you just start paying attention to the solid lines, to the dash lines. Still a bike lane, but it's kind of giving you the heads up that this is probably the best place for you to initiate your right-hand turn after you've checked that bike lane first. Because one of the common mistakes we make as drivers is underestimating bicycle speed. You may have passed that cyclist, a few driveways back, but as you've slowed down to make your right-hand turn, they've caught up to you. So you want to carefully check your mirror before you ever enter into that bike lane or ever prepare to make that right-hand turn. It's critical. And then also be on the lookout for kind of some newer things that you're seeing on the roads, different ways to communicate that something different is happening bike-wise in the zone you're in. There are some areas near Detroit Superior Bridge and more to come where there's highlighted green paint on the road. This is making sure it's still a standard bike lane in many of these areas, but they're highlighting it because they know it's a known area of conflict, and is to alert riders to be on definite lookout. But as a driver, it's really, really cautioning you that before you would make a move across that green lane, that it's clear and there aren't riders coming. The most prominent one is, westbound on the Detroit Superior Bridge. The bikes are coming down that fast because the downhill approach, and it's oftentimes the cars will underestimate how quick they're coming down, and it's easy to cut them off. So if you see the green in the bike lane, extra caution always. And then also you can keep an eye out for, there are some bike signals beginning to appear in the city as well. And that's something to where you might see these where your light remains red, but some of the lights in the intersection will turn green along with that bike signal, and you'll have cars moving on your right-hand side and the bikes moving cars moving on your left-hand side, bikes to the right, but you have to remain stationary and you're unable to turn yet. It's signaling, it's setting all the priority for everyone to move forward, and everyone that's turning right has to wait. So when you see these green, like the stop signs built with just a bike signal in there, again, slow down, take a second, learn what's happening there, and kind of get acclimated to and paying very close attention to the signal that's directly above your lane as a driver. Don't assume that just because you see some green lights in the periphery that you're good to go. Pay super close attention to the light above you and make sure that it's green for you as well. Because oftentimes when that bike signal goes green, your signal as a motor vehicle driver may not be. They're going to let those bikes move through first. And then once they're clear, you'll be able to make your right turn behind them. So, and then on the right-hand side there, and that screen is the Shero. All over the city, it's a place. You'll see them identified in the middle of the lane. It is not a bike lane. It's basically calling out some roads and routes through neighborhoods oftentimes that are just kind of directional guidance for cyclists, that roads that the city feels are preferred ways to move through and use lesser traveled roads. And it's also that constant reminder to drivers that you're going to see cyclists taking the lane and sharing the lane in these areas because there may not be other good bike infrastructure nearby. So this is like the best choice at the time. These are like the neighborhood roads that we're going to suggest you take. And it's just that it's an ID system that just, kind of lets drivers know to expect bikes, and for bikes to know that this you're probably on a preferred route and you're doing okay by taking this road. But it's okay to drive over this symbol, and it's just part of the center. That's why you'll see a place in the center of the roadway. It's just giving everyone an idea to expect bikes there, not a bike lane. And that share discussion kind of brings us to why cyclists take the lane in the first place. Going back to that first slide, I was telling you that bikes are legal road vehicles, and they have the right to the entire lane when necessary. And oftentimes the reason you'll see bikes in the center of the lane is there's debris in the road along the road edge, so they're kind of creeping on away from it to avoid it. There's oftentimes, especially in downtown areas, where the lane is just too narrow to share and keep away from parked cars or sewer grates or whatever is kind of in their path. And so you'll see them pull out and just take a position of confidence in the lane. And what you're seeing there, I'm going to refer to this a couple times during the presentation, is as a driver, you can pass that cyclist. That cyclist can be to the right of the lane. They can be in the center of the lane, and you can pass them. Crossing a double yellow is perfectly legal, provided that it's clear and safe for you to do so. You're passing a slower moving vehicle, like any other slow moving vehicle you may come across, like postal service delivery trucks or an Amish buggy or things like that. There's other situations for this, and crossing a double yellow and passing safely is absolutely legal as long as it's clear. But that's why you'll see bikes out there in the middle, especially in areas like this, in and around like urban areas. This rider's coming to an intersection and you're in your car behind him, and he's got a parked car to the side, he's got a car approaching his left, car waiting to turn at the intersection. If he hugs right and stays kind of tight to that car, he's asking for a lot of trouble. Door could open up, the car turning won't see him. So that's why you'll see the cyclists take the lane, they'll dominate the lane until it's safe for them to come back right. So in positions like this, just wait. The cyclist may turn right, they may signal to turn left or continue straight, but there's no point in passing the cyclist in this situation as a driver. There's just no room. And if they're pulling that room, they're taking it for a reason, because they can see farther ahead of you. They're ahead of you. They're doing this for a reason. They don't think they're cool, or they're not trying to, like prove a point or whatever. They're doing this because they feel exposed, and they're doing this for their own safety. So just relax a moment and wait, and then you can make your move once things clear up. We're going to cover some of the most common crashes that you're going to come across that happen, and it's because we live as drivers. We all live in a world where we get very accustomed to looking out for the big metal boxes. As we come to intersections, we look right, we look left, we look for the trucks, we look for the cars, and it's easy to miss the cyclists and the pedestrians. So this common crash here is a left cross. The most common way it happens is where you see that red cross signaling the crash area on this drawing. Oftentimes there's a car right there continuing straight through the intersection, right? So in your car, you pull up, you see, and you wait for the car to clear through, and then you hang your left-hand turn. But what you don't see is a cyclist hidden behind that car. So especially when you're talking about intersections, we're talking about urban areas, we're talking about these areas of conflict that are of greater percentages. This is where you need to pay more attention and start attuning yourself to looking beyond the metal boxes and start looking for cyclists and start looking for pedestrians and people on scooters before you just assume that car is done and you turn left behind them. Take a better look, take a second look for the cyclist that might be coming along behind them, either in the lane or to the right, and it helps you avoid this left cross. Again, because you're treating that bicycle like it's any other vehicle. You're watching them and judging their speed because they may be coming faster than you think. And then definitely looking for them in the shadow of that car. And again, that's why you may see those cyclists pull out and they'll take that lane, is because they're trying to make themselves more visible, because if they hide behind that car too much, they know that they can put themselves into this situation, right? So as drivers, we need to do better about keeping an eye out for that. And its cousin, which is the right hook. I discussed this a little bit earlier about passing a cyclist, as you approach an intersection, really giving it the gas, getting past them and then making that hard right-hand turn in front of them. You want to wait. If you're coming up to an intersection, you've got a cyclist ahead of you or beside you, it's better just to kind of back off, see what they're going to do, let them continue straight, make the right-hand turn, and then do your thing. Speeding up to an intersection to overtaking a cyclist or pinching them in is a recipe for disaster. So it's not worth the time you may save by trying to make that move. Just be patient. Remember about how vulnerable they are, and just give them time to move into and through that intersection with a clear pathway, and then make your move behind them. Don't try to to make it happen. That never, it just, yeah, it's never safe to do that, to really try to pull it off as a last minute move. And it happens a lot. The more time you spend on the bicycle, you can hear the car revving and you can hear it come do it, and you kind of know what's going to happen. So you force them to kind of really slow down and stop to keep themselves out of harm's way, when it really could just been a simple just slow down real quick, let them move through safely, get to their destination, and you can make your right turn behind them. It's not, you're saving someone's life and you're bringing those statistics down. So the left cross and that right hook are your number ones. Number two, at the intersection, you really just have to be patient, learn what to look for, and just be ready to just take that 2 or 3 seconds out of your life and invest it in someone else's life by not making those moves, and just slowing things down a little bit, so you know absolutely what's happening in an intersection before you move your vehicle into someone else's path. I talked about, first part about how cyclists make mistakes too. And what you'll see a lot of in Cleveland are cyclists riding the wrong way. We teach cyclists to ride with the flow of traffic since they're legal vehicles, but you will often see cyclists, especially in neighborhoods, riding the wrong way on the road. Now, this stems from a lot of reasons. It is related to a lot of incorrect education that happened in the 70s and 80s. I won't dig deep into why this type of wrong instruction became so prevalent, but it did, and it hangs out to this day. And oftentimes it comes from emulation as well, because if a new cyclist see the riders doing it wrong, they're going to emulate it, because they're like, well, everyone seems to be riding against traffic. I'm going to just copy that, because that guy I see riding my neighborhood all the time, he's doing it. So there's a lot of emulation happening there, and it is wrong. They should be riding with the flow of traffic. But again, it's going to be a very, very long cure to stop this. So in the meantime, those of us driving the heaviest, most dangerous vehicles on the road, I'm asking you to kind of train yourself to look right before you make those turns, especially in urban areas, because you see it a lot. Again, as cars, we're habituated to, we come to an intersection, you're going to look left and straight for approaching cars. You never really think to look right, because you're unaccustomed to a vehicle coming at you from that direction. But it's a good habit to kind of take a peek right real quick and just check for those wrong way cyclists, because it happened to me 2 days ago. I mean, it happens all the time, and it's just a good habit to develop, just to look out just in case. It's oftentimes it's not their fault. They're doing what they think is right, but it's easy to kind of just train yourself a little bit to help avoid this simple one from happening. Because like I said, it's going to be a long haul before this one gets corrected. Relating back to staying out of the door, or cyclists taking the lane, another obvious reason that they'll take the lane is to avoid this, to avoid the door zone of cars. But as drivers, there's something we can do to help this. You know, a lot of times, you know, especially suburban drivers and those that don't do a lot of parallel parking, you get used to parking lots and things like that, where you park your car and you just kick your door open and out you go. You don't think too much about things coming up behind you, especially not cyclists. But when you're talking about a lot of parallel parking in neighborhoods and in downtown areas, you got to learn to look out for cyclists and scooter riders, you know, coming down within just a few feet of the side of your car. And it's easy to do this. You just got to look in your mirror before you open your door. And you can take it one step further by doing, you know, a lot of times instead of just opening your door with your left hand and just kicking that door open, stop for a second, open your door. You think about opening your door with your right hand, what it forces you to shoulder turn and then look into that mirror and get a good look at what's happening before you open up your door. I've even had people suggest you take while you're training yourself to do this, take a piece of ribbon, tie it on your door handle as a reminder as you go to grab it with your left hand. That reminder of, no, stop, look at my mirror, maybe open my right hand, just make sure I'm not opening it up into the pathway of a rider or someone on a scooter. Because if you do this as a driver, you're blocking someone's right of way, and if they crash into your door, or you can force them out quickly in the traffic, as a driver, you're at fault for this. It's your responsibility, and it's our responsibility as drivers to not, you know, impede another vehicle's right of way. And so it's it's another simple thing we can all do as drivers to, you know, just watch the safety of those that are coming up behind us. Those are, you know, far more vulnerable. Do that right. It's called the Dutch reach. You can do plenty of Google searching on it and find it, but it's a simple trick to teach yourself how to pay more attention when you're opening up the door and keep from forcing a rider, well, in your personal space immediately or out into the road in front of their vehicle they had no time to check over their shoulder for. So another easy tip for drivers. You know, wind blast becomes more and more critical every year as vehicles continue to get bigger and bigger. So in the state of Ohio, there's a 3-foot minimum passing distance for cars passing bicycles. That 3 foot's a minimum. It's generally going to be enough if you're driving like a passenger car, like what's pictured there in the photograph. But if you drive a bigger SUV or a truck or something with kind of a blunted front end to it, you really need to leave more space, because 3 feet, while legal, isn't enough, because it creates a wall of wind that as you pass that cyclist, even just 3 feet away, it's going to push them offline. And oftentimes they'll have to swerve or try to recover from it. And the biggest of vehicles can actually create so much suction behind them that, you know, as you pass that cyclist, it'll push them away, and it sucks them back in behind you and pulls them back out into the lane as you pass. So the rule of thumb I'd like you to use is the bigger the vehicle gets, the more room you should leave to pass them, and slower if you can. Because especially, you know, some of these vehicles get quieter and quieter. You can really sneak up on some riders in a big vehicle, and they don't know you're there yet, and it can really kind of push them offline or into a curb, or, you know, cause, you know, quite a nasty crash. So again, as drivers, something very easy for us to do: leave an extra foot or two when you're passing if you have a big vehicle. That makes all the difference in the world, especially as the speed gets higher. We're going to hit on passing cyclists again. And another photo, making always sure to hit on this idea that it is okay whether the cyclist is on and depicted here, how they're on the right-hand side of the white line, or if they're in the right-hand side of the lane, or if they're taking a lane, you can pass them by crossing the double yellow line and leaving them 3 feet or more, as long as you're looking down that road and it's clear. You know, so if you're going up a hill and you can't see over the hill, it's a no-go. You wait. If it's around a corner and you're driving and you're not sure, then you wait. Never try to force it, because once you start passing, you can't take time back, right? You're in it, and most people, their instinct will be to avoid crashing into the other car head on, and that's going to mean moving over into the cyclist. Again, fully exposed on that bicycle. So Just wait until you're absolutely sure it's safe to pass and give them plenty of space. And you'll know it's safe to come back into your lane when you see them in your rearview mirror. You know, as you come around, sometimes it can be hard to kind of gauge when can you come back over and not hit them. But if you can see them in your right hand rearview mirror, and you can see them kind of fading back a little bit, then you know it's okay to go. Like it's a good way to kind of gauge if you have enough space or not. And then in intersections, here's another case of you'll see cyclists taking the lane for very good reason. And we're, as drivers, we should kind of hold back here. If you're in that maroon Toyota right there, you don't want to try to make a move and come around a cyclist getting in close to the intersection. Just wait back, let them continue through and make your right hand turn behind them. And leave them plenty of space. Like, don't really get in, because they may be slowing down too and taking a look around, trying to assess what's happening. But if there's a bike lane there and it's dashed on that one side, this is where you kind of can creep into that bike lane and get ready to make your turn. But think about what a cyclist feels like that in this situation. There is no bike lane. There is no space for them. Visibility is limited. They're coming into a park, into a busy intersection, sharing it with thousands and thousands of pounds of metal boxes. And so leave them space, hang back and give them the respect they deserve as your fellow human being, and then make your turn and do your thing afterwards. Always extra caution near the intersections. So, we'll often, hear the complaints of people will see a cyclist run a red light, which is illegal. Just flat out any vehicle, since bikes are legal road vehicles and as drivers we're driving legal road vehicles, none of us can run red lights. But there is a key difference for bicycles that you may see, and I put this in here just as a point of understanding, so you understand what you may be seeing. Is there are a couple different types of street lights you encounter. Some street lights they cycle day in, day out. They'll stay a couple minutes red, a couple minutes green. They cycle back and forth just in a steady pattern for the rest of their lives. And they just work like that. And it's, cyclists and drivers, we're all stopping them at the same time, waiting the same amount of time and doing our thing. But in more populated areas, many of the signals are triggered when a motor vehicle pulls up and stops at them. They will stay green for the busy street for long periods of time and only trigger to change off the side streets when a car pulls up and stops there. So that presents a problem for a bicycle because it's not heavy or large enough to trigger those sensors. So this is why oftentimes you may see a bike kind of, pull up to an intersection and they stop and they'll look around and they'll proceed on red like you see in the image here, and that is legal in Ohio. It's part of what's called like a dead red law. It's because that cyclist will wait there indefinitely, and that red light will never change green for them. They're just not heavy enough to trigger it. So sometimes in some respects, they may be doing you a favor because if they sit there and wait, you will be sitting there and waiting as well because they're sitting on top of the trigger that your car would normally actuate. Now, just to kind of clarify, you will see cyclists oftentimes roll up to a stoplight like this and never really stop, and they kind of give it a glance both ways and they roll right through it. And I will tell you that is illegal, but they may do this because, again, we're all human and they ride this route every single day and they learned that light is never changing for them, and so they'll cheat it a little bit. Just wrong, and they certainly can get a ticket for it. But as drivers, I think we can all admit as well that if we lived on the street that a red light never changed for us at all, we would tire of that pretty quickly too, and probably do a very similar thing. And at some point that can be fixed for a motor vehicle, but it can never really be fixed for a bike. So you may see them doing that. We're not condoning running red lights. We're trying to explain that, like, how you may see a cyclist do this at some red lights because they've learned that it will not change for them. And this is also the same type of thing that happens with motorcycles as well. If we have any moto riders on the Zoom tonight. And a few other situations. More and more roundabouts are showing up in and around Cleveland. That is a period of space where you'll see a cyclist definitely take the lane, and never ever try to overtake a cyclist in a roundabout. Right? They occupy that lane on purpose. They need to take that space. There's no space for cyclists specialized there, so they take the lane for that, and so remain behind them. Distracted driving, we could do a whole another seminar on that, but I beg of you, when you're driving your car and you need to stay focused on the task at hand. There are, I'll leave that there. We all know what I'm talking about there. But I will spend a little time here on sun angle and glare. There have been some there have been incidents in our area where cyclists have been seriously injured and or killed because of sun angle and glare. And use your sunglasses, use your sun visors. But in the end, if the sun glare gets to be such a point where you cannot safely see where you are going, you have to stop. There's no trying to feel your way through it, because you can't see pedestrians, you can't see people on bikes, and you can't really see cars. There's certain times of the year where if the sun glare is so bad, if you can turn and look for a more shaded street or more coverage, like from tree cover, or find like an alternate if it's a street used all the time, don't proceed if you cannot see where you're going. We get lazy as drivers, myself included, and you're like, oh, if I could just, I know my turns just in a few blocks, I can get through this. But that's a roulette game that no one should be playing. So, and it also goes with illegal courtesies. You may sometimes pull to an intersection or come to an area and you'll wave a cyclist on or try to do them a favor, which a lot of cyclists appreciate, but you'll see them decline. It is best to treat them at intersections like we talked before, and in different areas, just treat them like other motor vehicles. If it's your turn to go, go. Let them wait their turn to go. Oftentimes by doing something, by trying to give them priority or giving them like courtesy of letting them go first, other cars at the intersection may not understand what you've done. The cyclist may come out, or the pedestrian will step out, and the other car isn't in on what's going on here, and they go ahead and go. It can put the cyclist or pedestrian in a bad position. So, stick to the rules of the road. If you're going to defer things to the person on the right or whoever came first, do your thing. Actually avoid those extra courtesies like that, the illegal courtesies of cyclists, because it can actually put them in trouble. Some cyclists will take them, some will pass, and it's just going to be based on experience. And then a quick note on children on bikes. Everything we've talked about tonight so far is about cyclists on the road and sharing lanes and things, but you have kids that don't, like young riders that don't understand all these traffic laws. They don't understand all the, the ins and outs of dealing with motor vehicles. So they'll be on sidewalks a lot. So before you would ever turn into driveways things like that, it pays to start attuning yourself to looking out more for the people outside the boxes. Again, we're going to look for people, pushing strollers. We're going to look for people running. We're going to look for kids that might be a little bit lower on the bike, and start tuning yourself into that world beyond cars, and paying more attention and looking out for the vulnerable users out there that might be hidden from your sight, because for all intents and purposes, they're almost forced to ride on the sidewalk. And to start bringing it to a close, spend a lot of time tonight talking about drivers, and that's the point. You're looking at this list, you can also see this is what we're teaching cyclists all the time, and because it's two-sided. We're all on the road together. We spend a lot of time talking about taking the lane to be visible, and we spend being predictable and moving like a car when there isn't a bike lane, and staying to the right as far as practicable. But if you need the lane to be safe or to avoid debris, it's okay. Obeying that intersection hierarchy that cars do, like avoiding trying to take precedence or leave early. Treating an intersection just like you would, like when you're in a car. Signaling lane changes, choosing correct intersection positioning for when you're making a left-hand turn, things like that. Like these are the things we're constantly on cyclists about, but it works best too when there are some differences and you see some things happening sometimes as a driver you don't understand. And that was part of the goal tonight, was to kind of tune you in a little bit of like why you do see the things you do, and trying to understand them a little better and how it works in the bigger picture of when you have one lane being allotted to two very, very different vehicles. So closing out, the main takeaways tonight is when in doubt, treat cyclists as the drivers of vehicles. Before you would pass them or before you cross their path and things like that. Treat them the same unless there's some other kind of bicycle facility there for them. As drivers, and then when we're on our bikes, we both can take actions to avoid these crashes, right? Always pay extra attention at intersections and driveways, because that's where most of these crashes occur. And understand why and when like cyclists are in the center of the lane. And so I think that's important for drivers to understand. It's oftentimes it's mistaken for bravado or what have you. There's a very strong reason for that. And if you dislike that, you just might be the next big proponent for bike lanes or protected bike lanes, because it does give, it lets us move at different speeds down the same road and not have conflict of the shared lane. Always that 3-foot passing law. We talked about the blind spots and opening your doors, and in the end, this is all just about roadways being for all users, and we're all humans here. We're all husbands and fathers and sons and daughters, and we're all just trying to get where we want to go safely. And so it's just working together, and everyone just wants to get where they're going and not radically change the course of someone's life because of an error in haste or just a misunderstanding of how this is all supposed to work together. So we've hit on a whole lot of things. I'm going to drop out of this presentation and we'll take a peek in the chat and see if I can answer any questions for you guys. And if we don't get to all the Q&A and the questions tonight, we're always available here at Bike Cleveland. info@bikecleveland.org. And all the staff emails that are available on our website. We're always here to, if there's anything was ambiguous or you need more information on any stuff, we're here to try to make the road safer for everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason, for sharing that knowledge about bicycle and motorist information today. Such vast information. There was not too many questions today in the chat, but there is one question I would like to bring up. This is such good information. I know this workshop will be recorded and it's going to be shared on our social media platform so people can watch it at a later time. But one thing I want to know is there's so many people that did not participate today that could benefit from this information, especially like new drivers that are going to the driver education schools to learn how to drive. How do you think what do you think is the best course for getting those new drivers this information so that they can also learn how to navigate and share the road with other cyclists?
It's like turning a big ship, right? There are moves statewide to get more things like this added into like your initial driver training. There's always been something about bikes in there, but there is a move to get more of this added in. And there are also a lot of the driver training courses are beginning to add more of this into the curriculum as well. Kind of starting to kind of build it in there from the beginning. But it's something like this, like the vast majority of drivers are already out there. And sometimes these infrastructure changes are happening, they just appear. Like a road gets repaved, now there's bike lanes, and it's tough to know what to do. So that is part of what we're doing here, but it's also going to become better over time as more of it gets built in just to the curriculum itself that everyone sees versus just those who have the time or opportunity to kind of catch in on something like this. But it's like I said, it's turning a slow ship. So we take it step by step. We do this for anyone that most of the time this training happens at a business. We have businesses that earn like a bicycle friendly business designation. So this presentation is generally done in person to fleet drivers or people that are going to drive company cars, and they want, like the company wants to make sure they're doing it right around cyclists. So that's where most of this training heads out to.
Okay, great, thank you. That's a good point to mention about companies that have their employees drive their company vehicles, because the company want to make sure that their employees are doing the right thing. So that's good to know. So with that being said, I just wanted to mention to everyone who's watching this that sharing is caring. So that if you do know of a company or you are aware of a group or organization, especially the youth as well, because the youth is our future, that please pass along this information, our contact information, and we will be more than happy to present on a personalized, same information, but catered to the group that's in need of the training. And so that we all can share the road together. And like you said earlier, we don't want to change the course of someone's life over a few seconds of impatientness because we're on the road and people didn't want to wait. So with that being said, I just wanted to, here's a chat question. Oh, you dropped, okay, yes.
I put 2 links for anyone that wants to take this further on their own time. I put 2 links into the chat you can click and open up in the tabs and read after this. It goes in a little deeper on the bike lanes. And then some of the concepts I talked about the laws are kind of drawn out a little better for those that want to get real nerdy about Ohio Revised Code and about the dead red law and like some of the things. There's stuff in here for both bikes and drivers. So whether you're a cyclist or a driver, those links have information for both modes.
Okay, great. Sounds good. I want to drop the links also over on our friends who are tuning in on Facebook so they can see the links as well too. So let me see one more thing. Okay, yes. AARP has a safe drivers course, which is good. I like safe drivers. I just like the title of that because we all need to be safe as we're driving out here. And so we can look into that. And of course, sharing is caring. All right, so if there's any other questions, if you want to, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to. If you didn't want to, type it in, feel free. But that was our main goal tonight, to get this information out so that all road users can see that the reasons and how we can all share the road together and to be happy while we're on the road, whether we're biking, whether we're walking, whether we're scootering, whether we are in our vehicle. At the end of the day, we all want to get to our destination safely and happy. And so if we just know some of the background of why different groups do things that they do, then that's helpful for everyone. So I do appreciate everyone's time for tuning in today. It is a beautiful day and there's still time to go out and ride your bike if you would like to. If you have any other further questions, you can reach out to us directly and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Jason.
You bet.
Thanks.